Good afternoon and welcome to ICE Webinars, a cool place for hot topics. We're excited for today's presentation, which will be a video broadcast featuring Michael Gossman. ICE Webinars would like to thank today's sponsor, Althea. Althea brings an established global presence to the market space, managing more than 1.4 million medical devices and over 2,700 healthcare facilities across 17 countries. Althea is more than a diagnostic imaging organization. They are an all-encompassing engineering company with more than 150 years of combined experience across diverse modalities and manufacturers. Their organization is built on four core service offerings: a world-class medical parts program, capital sales and installation program, technical support services, depot repair services, and a 5-star training program. For more information about today's sponsor, please visit althea-group.com. Couple of reminders before we start today. ICE Magazine is excited to announce the location for the Imaging Conference and Expo in 2023. ICE 2023 will be February 17 through 19 in Nashville, Tennessee. More details, including updates on pending CE credits from ASRT and ACI, are online at attendice.com. Also, ICE Magazine is headed to AHRA 2022. The dates are July 10 through 13 in Phoenix, Arizona. If you're attending this conference, stop by our booth 424 and ask the ICE team how you can join our annual happy hour, Drinks on ICE. Okay, today's webinar, as always, is eligible for one ARRT Category A CE credit by the AHRA. You can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive the CE credit. You will be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any issues or questions, reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. As I mentioned earlier, Michael Gossman, Modality Manager of Althea US, is our presenter today. Michael, you may begin your broadcast whenever you're ready.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another webinar with MD Publishing. As mentioned, my name is Michael Gossman. I am the Injector Modality Manager here at Althea US, located just north of Nashville, Tennessee, where we take care of CT, X-ray, MRI, and injectors. And like I said, I'm the Modality Manager of Injectors, and I want to first say, excuse my voice. I'm recovering from a cold and a little bit of laryngitis, so please bear with me. We've had a lot of requests with injectors on what's so special about Acist Injectors. It seems like the manufacturer puts a big limit on what we can do and can't do. So we decided to do a webinar and introduce you to the two main injectors that Acist puts out. The CVi Injector, which is used only in the angio or interventional category, and the Empower CTA and CTA Plus injectors, which are used in the CT. Now, they do make an Empower MR injector, but that is hydraulic driven, and it's a little bit more complicated, but yet simplified, and servicing that is complicated because you're dealing with hydraulics and you have to bleed it and purge it, and so we really don't get into that injector. And to be honest with you, that Empower MR is a really solid unit. Very minimal problems with that unit. So let's start off with the CVi injector. Like I said, it's used in angio-interventional, and this is kind of a unique injector for the fact that it's not positioned up and down. It's positioned at an angle. And the reason why it's positioned at an angle is when it purges, using the syringe at that angle, the air is pushed out back into the contrast reservoir. It automatically refills, and then it purges, and they have a small bearing in here that will go into the syringe sensor that identifies whether it's purged and all the air is removed or not. So it doesn't have to go up and down, just at an angle, because we all know air goes to the highest point, and at this angle that the syringe sits in goes to the highest point. Another unique feature on this, because it is all automatic, you have multiple sensors on here. Some of the sensors, one is a contrast sensor that identifies if there's contrast to be filled into the syringe. As I mentioned, the syringe sensor, you also have a chamber sensor, air column detect sensor, and a manifold sensor. With it being automatic, you have to have more sensors to ensure that things are working properly. And I'll get into those just a little bit later. If you notice, there is no way to move the piston in and out as with a regular injector. You can push the buttons up and run it up and down. There is no control for the piston. The piston can only be controlled by the software. And I'm going to turn this on and let this get started. As it turns on, it has a small power supply that provides power to the injector, through the injector head, and into the display. As it powers up, it's going to come up to the Acist screen. And that's where, if you push and hold it, you go into the screen calibration. And as we know with touchscreens, that's one of the most common calibrations you have to do is touchscreen calibration. You push the cursors on there, and then it will reboot with that new information and come up. The user has limited control of what they can do because it is automatic. They have to go through the sequence, the setup sequence, just to inject. It's not a load and go like a lot of the other injectors are. And again, this goes back to it being automatic. So I'll tell you to hit start. We're going to go with cardiac. And it's going to move the syringe back and forward and back again to establish home positioning. I get a lot of questions saying, how do I move this syringe? You can't. The machine has to move the syringe. So it's found its back starting position. Now it's going to go forward to the forward position. As it's doing this, you have to basically go through an entire setup just to verify the operation of the system. And you have to use, if you're the service technician, you have to use different jigs to basically cheat out the sensors to get to the point where you can actually test the injector. And one important tool that you have to have ready for you is a finger, because now it says load syringe assembly into chamber. If we were to load this syringe assembly, we cannot do a checkout or get to a point where we can actually do a checkout. So our finger is going to simulate the syringe. So it tells me to load the syringe assembly. I'm not going to. I hit done. It says syringe not detected. I put my finger in the syringe sensor and hit OK. The sensor sees that it is closed, and now it's going to engage the syringe plunger, which is just my finger. And the piston is going to run forward, is going to advance. And now I can take my finger out. And now the piston is driving the syringe all the way forward to load with contrast. It tells me to spike the contrast. Okay? Well, I'm going to spike the contrast with a test jig. Load the test jig into the contrast sensor and hit done. Now it's going to go through a filling. It's not really doing it, but we are cheating it so we can run an operations check. Filling, I say OK. Now it tells me that I can advance on to loading saline through the pump, through the peristaltic pump, but we're not going to do that because we're not concerned with that. So now it's loading the syringe. Even though there's nothing in there, we simulated the syringe. And if you do PMs on these, you actually have to go through 60 to 70% of the PM just to get to the point to start the PM, which I find is very interesting. Now it says syringe valve closed, so I'm going to use my finger again, insert it into the sensor, and hit OK. Now it's going to purge. I'm going to let it go for about 2 or 3 seconds. Release my finger. It's going to go filling again. So it's going to go through purge and fill several times, and each time it says syringe valve closed, you will use your finger to simulate it. Let it purge for 2 or 3 seconds. Release your finger. Now it's happy. It's purged a couple times. It says to load saline. We don't worry about that. Purge tubing. We're going to purge it. We've done that. Hit done. Now we're going to hit flush. This is where you can check your pump to make sure it's noisy, make sure it's not excessively noisy. It'll run automatically for 10 seconds. We've done that. We don't have to purge air again. Another unique feature on this is how do you control flow? Well, you can program it in it, but you also have to calibrate the hand controller. And it's calibrated every time you put a new one on, and this will be good for 5 cases. So we're going to hit done, and where it says starting hand controller calibration, once you hit OK, you have 4 seconds to push down the C button on the hand controller. And that will calibrate the pressure of the thumb, of the operator's thumb. So now the hand controller is calibrated. Now, even though in our protocol our flow is 4 milliliters per second, we can actually, by the pressure of our thumb, vary the flow rate just by pressure, soft or hard, and the flow rate will go up and down, but will never go past 4, or our programmed flow rate. So if I can go in and program it to, let's say, 10, okay, it will never go above 10 milliliters per second. So the operator can actually slow down the flow rate or speed it up one way or the other just by the controller. And some of the cardiologists love that feature. They just love it. And they love this injector because of this feature. So let's look at some of the indicators we have here that we haven't satisfied the sensors with. One is air detected. This is the ACD, air column detector sensor. It will detect any air in the tubing going to the patient. And you will use a jig, something like this. It's, if you go to our training, this will be demonstrated further. And we will use water to purge this. To get rid of the air column detector. and that's gone now. So we will use an air bubble to go back and forth in the ACD to verify that the sensor is working. We also have a manifold valve open. This is the manifold. Again, it's a test jig. And the way this operates is you'll have saline and contrast going through this. And as the contrast is pushed to the patient, it will push the plunger back, cutting off the saline tubing, sending contrast to the patient. Once you're done with the contrast and you hit your saline button, it will then push the plunger the opposite way and send saline to the patient. So it is a manifold. It determines through which button you're pushing whether it be contrast or saline going to the patient. This system is also unique that it does have saline going to the patient. This is one of the few injectors out there, if not the only injector besides the Baravanta, that you can use saline in the interventional and cardiac or angio suites. Bayer injectors usually only have one head and it's only contrast. That stands true with the Angiomat, the Mark 7, Provis, and with the, yeah, that's it. The other ones, CVi is one of the only few ones that have both contrast and saline going to the patient. And again, that's why the doctor likes it or the team likes it, because they don't have to manual flush. You just push another button and it flushes. Since this is automatic fill and you don't have to break the, I'm going to call it the seal to the patient, one set of disposables for the injector can be used up to 5 patients. After 5 patients, you have to remove them and install new disposables. So again, it's a cost saving. Instead of having to replace syringes all the time, you can use up to 5 patients. So let's go ahead and put in an injection and see how it works with the autofill also. So I'm going to do a flow rate of 10, volume of 75, and the PSI, okay, our volume limit is 20, so I'm going to go 20 then, depending on what we have selected on the procedures. So we're going to do flow rate of 10, volume of 20. I'm going to hit inject. OK to arm injector. I say OK. It's ready to inject. Now, how do I inject? By pushing the button. I'll push contrast. And it's injecting. And if you actually look at the flow rate, if you can see this, I'm injecting. I can go all the way up to 10 or slow down and go to 3 or 4 if I want to, just by the pressure on the switch. So we're going to inject all the way, use up the whole syringe, and now it automatically fills in process. No seals are broken. It's refilling the syringe, which takes less time, and also you don't have to switch out syringes or any of that. It saves time in the suite. And it automatically refills to 100. So let's go to a higher flow rate. So let's see how high this will go. It will go up to a 40 milliliters per second flow rate. Will it go any higher? Let's see if it'll go 50. No. So the flow rate is limited to 40 milliliters per second. Let's see how high pressure can go. I entered 1200 psi. Can I go any higher? No, the pressure limit is 1200. So the flow rate, the max flow rate on this injector is 40 milliliters per second and 1200 psi. That's the max flow rate. Now I'm going to take this back down to 10 Let's do a volume of 100. Oh, I can't do that either. Okay, let's do 90. Okay, flow rate of 10, 90. I'm going to hit ARM, which is selecting the mode. It says large injection, okay. That means it's warning you it's going to be a large, fast injection. Anything above whatever selection injection, yes, selected injection you have will determine that. I'm going to say okay, okay to ARM, ready to inject. And as you can see, it's flashing back and forth. And if we had lower lights, you would see that the back light here is flashing also. So I'm going to go ahead and inject. And with a large injection, it's going to tell me every time I let go of this, of the hand switch, it's going to say okay to ARM. Now it's refilling back to 90 because I didn't have enough to inject. And we're going to go back to the low injection again. And it's refilling. While it's refilling, I'm going to talk about a couple issues that have come up that for repairs that we've had to do depot repairs for, or even take tech support calls for. The backlight here, this backlight is very expensive. Acist charges $10,000 to replace the backlight along with the loaner fee of approximately $5,000 a month. Excuse me. The problem with this backlight is not the backlight, but contrast intrusion. If you can see around this manifold sensor, you see how it's darkened? That is all from contrast intrusion. This is a dangerous situation because it can actually spark and arc and burn up the rest of the injector. Without proper cleaning and maintenance, this will happen. Now, here at Althea, we can replace these significantly cheaper than what Acist charges, but it's still an expensive repair. So maintenance around the light assembly is very important. This is one area right here is a problem, and also inside the chamber is a problem. There is a drain hole inside the chamber, and it gets clogged with contrast. So the contrast, any fluid contrast will just sit in there, seep inside the light, and we've actually had instances where there's arcing. You can actually see the arcing going on when the lights are turned low. Again, dangerous situation. Contrast will eat right through this. If you see any of this, then these should be replaced immediately, because you never want arcing and sparking during a procedure, do we? Okay? So another tech support call we've had is this standby button. So I'm going to put it in standby and turn it off. Okay? One thing about this injector, if you clear an error, it doesn't automatically advance to the next segment. It will stop and you have to hit OK. If you don't hit OK, it never advances. It just stays where it's at. Even though you've corrected the problem, it'll stay where it's at. So I'm going to turn it back on. Now it's in standby mode. I have the button pushed. So it's going to boot up. Okay. It's in standby mode. It never progressed to the start mode or the start menu, okay? It's in standby. Okay, let's take it off standby. I took it off standby. It's not working. You keep hitting that button back and forth, and nothing happens. That's because even though you release the standby, you have to hit OK. And a lot of, it's actually tech support calls. My CVi injector won't go past standby. I've hit the button, nothing happens. Did you hit OK? What do you mean OK? There's another selection, lower right-hand corner, that says OK. So even with this one, you hit it, it's still in standby. Hit the OK button, and you move on. Very simple, but can cause a lot of problems at 5:30 in the morning when they're starting to set up. Or if you just done the PM the night before and you forget that standby button, guess who's getting the phone call? All right, so that was a brief description of the CVi injector. Now we're going to go over to the CTA injectors. I like the CTA injectors. They're a very robust system. Very few issues with these, but some of the terminology is kind of interesting. So let's start off with the user interface, which is a display. But they don't call it the display. They call it the remote. Now you're thinking, well, the remote, what is that, the hand switch? No, the remote is actual user interface. When I started working on these, I'm thinking, what do you mean remote? Is there a remote button? Is there a remote, just like your TV? No, the remote is the display. So if you're reading the manual and it says check the remote connections, then it's actually the display. Also, with a USB connector that goes from the remote to the power module, also interface module, the USB cable only goes in one port. It's not universal. So if it doesn't connect right away, change the ports. And it's usually, if you're looking underneath, it's the foremost USB connection. So if you get a loaner from us and it doesn't work, change a USB connection. Very common problem. Well, it's just a USB connection. Nope, it only works in one port. Okay? Another unique feature about this is even with the CTA, which is the older version, CTA Plus, these can be ran independently without the remote. So you don't need a remote to run the injector. Whereas the other injectors out there, whether it be the Stellant, the OptiVantage, whatever it is, you need the user interface, whereas the CTA does not. Okay? And I like that feature. Something else, this is a touchscreen on the CTA Plus. Okay? I've got questions. How do you calibrate it? Well, there's one line in the service manual that says, if I can do this here properly, you rotate the head horizontally, and it'll take this into the touchscreen calibration when you boot it up. Let's see what else. So let's look at entering a protocol. If you dealt with a Stellant, you know you can go contrast saline, so on and so forth. Okay? With these injectors, if you go to select one for contrast, it automatically goes to contrast. You can't start with saline. It goes straight to contrast. That's your first phase. I put 0.5, 5, and 10 in there. The second phase, it's already listed as contrast. If you select saline, all the other phases are wiped out. Once you hit saline, you can't add any more phases. But if you hit contrast, and let's do a 10, well, that would be a 1. And then the fourth phase is blanked out after the third phase of saline. It's unique that way. The actual injector head itself is very simplified inside of here. Syringes, If you're servicing these, they design these syringes. We all know injector syringes are one-time use for the patient. But if you're servicing them, you don't want to go through a syringe every time you're servicing them. So you have to think a little bit differently than Acist does. With these tabs, once the piston goes up, the tabs close around the piston. If you remove the syringe, the tabs don't fully retract all the way. So the next time you put it in, the piston's going to come up and start breaking off these tabs, leaving the syringe useless. So if you are servicing it, easiest way to reuse a syringe is to take the syringe and push down on a hard surface. That will flatten out the tabs once more, and you can reuse this syringe for your servicing. So I'm going to load a syringe, and as soon as I load a syringe, it's going to give me initialize, dual initialize. I can initialize contrast, I can initialize saline, manual, or auto on. I'm going to just initialize contrast. You have to hold it down for about a second. It runs the piston up. So it's basically homing the piston is what it's doing. Okay, so now it's ready to be filled. Like the Stellant, this has an auto load where you put the protocol in, you hit auto load, and it fills up the contrast and saline to the needed volume for that protocol. These injectors call it something different. It's called protocol fill, or on the older version, it's called protofill. What does that mean? It means it's going to fill it up to the protocol volume that it's requested, and here it's only requested 1.5 milliliter. 15 milliliters for the volume. So I'm going to hit protocol fill. And there's our 15. Well, it's purging. There it is. And now it's ready to go to do the injection. So I will come over here, okay, purge all air, and I'm going to purge the air. Now once I tow the injector head down, I get the arm. I'll arm it. System is armed. I'll say run.
Injection in progress.
And it's doing the injection. Another feature these have is the if I pronounce it correctly, extravasation detector. It's called EDA, extravasation detection analyzer. And the way this works, accessory, I'm sorry, the way this works is a patch that goes onto the patient's arm, and it detects the resistance in the patient's arm. If you have a blown vein or the contrast saline is not going where it's supposed to go, then it's going to form a bubble on the arm, increasing or decreasing the resistance, and it'll give you an error. There is a module, a test module for this that Acist does sell, but you have to go there to their training to get it, and then purchase it. Excuse me. We have developed, here at Althea, we have developed a module to not only do the same thing that the OEM module does, but even better. We connect it into it, you use your meter for the resistance, and then you dial in what resistance you want to check this module out. And it's included in our Acist service kit when you come to training. they're used out there and they need to be checked. Not just, there's two different forms of PMs that they do out there. One's a PM and one's a field test form. On the PM, all you do is basically unplug it, tells you that it's out of range, and plug it back in. If you do the field test form, it has you do 3 different resistance to show in range and 2 out of ranges. That has to be done so you know that your EDA module is calibrated properly. And we can calibrate these here at depot level at Althea. So we do make that module or that test jig to use on this. It's included in our Acist service kit. So now we have this just popped up. Preventive maintenance due, please contact customer service. You can change that, and of course it's included in your training here at Althea. I can't get into that, but that can be done. So we did an injection. It is a unique injector that it can be ran individually from the control module in the scan room. So let's go ahead and replace the syringe. We're going to do it single. Through our training on both these models, we go through the PMs and also changing the dates and calibrations. There's no real calibration on the CVi. We can do the volume and pressure calibrations on the CTA. They're nothing to be afraid of. They're just another regular injector. This, again, going back, CTA and CTA Plus are very robust units. I like working on them. They're pretty much modular components. I don't know. I just enjoy working on them. They're a great injector. We have our inject button, and as I mentioned with the EDA module, you'll have a cable like this. This end will plug into EDA module, and then this part will be the patch and go onto the patient's arm where the IV is. And again, we have that test jig to test all this out. That concludes our introduction to the Acist CVi and CTA injectors. I hope this has been beneficial to you. You can always contact us at Althea, and that number will be put up here after this webinar. Thanks for joining, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for not only your time, but also the presentation today. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit the sponsor's website. You can learn more about Althea by visiting althea-group.com. As a quick reminder, you can obtain your CE certificate after completing the post-webinar survey that will arrive in your inbox in 1 hour. If you have any issues or questions while completing your survey, please reach out to us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. You can find a list of upcoming ICE webinars online at theicecommunity.com/webinars. We'll see you back soon. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.